Now, you see down at that end of the hallway, and you see there's a little mirror down there. There's a little extension to the hallway down there. Now, back in Victorian times, when the Crescent was originally built, they tried to think of every amenity and luxury that the people that stayed here would want, because they were at the upper end of society and used to luxuries, and they wanted this to be just a fabulous place for people to come and stay. There's one thing they left out then. Back in Victorian times, people frequently traveled with their personal servants. Ladies would have a lady's maid, gentlemen might have a valet, and if you had children with you, you might have a governess or a nanny, a carriage driver. A problem they had, something we should all suffer from, no place for the servants to stay. So after a couple of years, they built this annex on it. It's a little 3-story annex if you go out and look at the Crescent from outside. And that's what it is. They had one floor for the male servants, one floor for the female servants. Some of the staff lived out there too in some dormitory-style rooms. Now, when this became a college for young ladies, that was the music conservatory out there. Very important field of study for young ladies in society. So they had 27 pianos, various instruments, violins and violas for the ladies to practice on. Now, when Mr. Baker took over in 1937, that whole area took on a much darker aspect. Mr. Baker had the windows on the 3rd floor covered up, and right where the little hallway starts, he had 2 reinforced steel doors installed. The reason he did that was so no sound would escape from that area. And I'll explain why. When people came here in various stages of cancer to be cured, some of them were in later stages, possibly already experiencing pain from the disease itself. Now, Mr. Baker offered no form of pain relief to people back then. Back then, they used morphine and laudanum to treat pain and cancer and other diseases. Mr. Baker believed in the power of positive thinking and using your mental exercises to get over the pain. Now, that's not a bad idea up to a point. But after a certain point, the people were really suffering, and they were in a lot of pain. And he only basically had one form of treatment for the people here. That was his secret formula number 5. And he would inject this secret formula number 5 into these people up to 7 times a day at the point of their tumors. And apparently these were very painful injections. His secret formula number 5 consisted of ground watermelon seeds, peppermint, corn silk, rose petals, glycerin water, and something called carbolic acid. So you had people in pain from the disease, in pain from the so-called cure, no pain relief. Well, eventually even the bravest and strongest among us will start moaning or crying out in pain as it became too much. And if that started happening, of course, it'd tip everybody else off that the whole thing was just a big con. He was just here making money and not curing anybody, and he couldn't have that. So as soon as somebody started exhibiting signs of pain or complaining about it, that's where they go, behind the steel doors, into what Mr. Baker called the asylum. And if anybody asked, well, where's Mrs. Jones? She was in the room next to me yesterday. Mr. Baker would say, oh, the disease became too much for her. She couldn't handle it. She actually lost her mind and went insane. So for her protection and everybody else's protection here, we had to put her into the asylum behind the steel doors. Now, of course, it was for the protection of his reputation. People went behind the steel doors there. And unfortunately, for most of the people, once they went into the asylum there, the next stop would be going down to the morgue, because they were probably in the later stages of cancer, and this would have been the terminal part of the cancer for them. Now, one of the spirits that haunts here, people that stay in the main corridor here, frequently report at about 3:30 in the morning hearing the sound of wheels on a wooden floor. Now, back when this was a hospital, Mr. Baker pulled up all the carpeting, so it was just the hardwood floors here. And if anybody looks out to see what's making this noise, they always describe seeing a woman in an old-fashioned nurse's uniform, and she's pushing a gurney. On the gurney, apparently, is a body draped with a sheet. She materializes down there in that little part of the hallway, pushes it down the entire length of the corridor till she gets to the elevator, and she disappears. Now, people have tried to talk to her. They thought, why is this strange woman pushing a gurney at 3:30 in the morning? And anytime people try to talk to her, they've even yelled at her. They've even waved their hands in front of her face when she doesn't respond. She's like the young lady in the mist. She's a residual haunting. She never acknowledges them. She just continues on this grim journey with a very stoic look on her face till she gets down here and disappears again. Now, 3:30 in the morning is when she usually appears, and that seems like a really strange time to be removing bodies. But remember, everybody that came here got saved and cured. Nobody died. So when people actually did die, it had to be as hush-hush as possible. At this point in his career, Mr. Baker was on the FBI's radar. He'd been involved in some scandals. Some reporters were occasionally snooping around looking for a new story on him, and certainly he didn't want the other patients here knowing that it was all just a big con. So we believe that's what this lady, was removing the bodies at 3:30 in the morning, so nobody would know about them. Now, down there, we have another specter that appears in room 3500. You go down past that, we return to your left. What started off as the Started off as the servants' quarters, then became this asylum for pain patients. So the next step in its evolution, of course, would be to turn it into the honeymoon suites. And that's exactly what they did. Thank you, ma'am. You got a little smile on your face there. They remodeled down there, made luxury suites geared towards honeymooners. In one of those rooms, room 3500, a specter appears we refer to as the Lady in White. She always appears there at the foot of the bed when people are in their room there. She's in a nightgown, a white nightgown, apparently in the style of the 1930s, and she just stands there looking at them with a very mournful look on her face. The fact that she's in a nightgown from the 30s, we speculate she was probably a patient here, and the fact that she's only seen down there, she may have been somebody that was already put into the asylum, just simply waiting till it was her time to go down to the morgue. And if she did die in there like the people that did, she probably died a very sad and lonely death in there. So when she appears, people always describe her as having a very sad, mournful look on her face. She doesn't speak to them at all. She just looks at these people, hopefully starting off in a new happy phase of their life that they've just gotten married. Now, we did have let me pass this nurse picture around before I show you the next one. This is what we think the nurse looks like based on descriptions we've heard. Now, the Lady in White was actually caught on film by somebody, a honeymoon couple in there. And when it showed to other people there, including our current general manager's first wife, she saw that picture and she said, "That's the lady I saw standing at the foot of our bed." In fact, she wouldn't stay in that room the first night. She saw him twice, and she said, "I'm out of here." And this is what the specter looks like that appears.
Okay.
Now, we really can't tell, but if you look at her face, and it could have been a distortion of the camera, it looks like there's something wrong with her jaw to me, so which actually lends credence to the fact she may have actually been a patient there. Perhaps she had cancer here, and she was actually in the asylum down there waiting until it was her turn to go down to the morgue. But she's down at that end of the hallway.
So, we've been down there. It's like kind of creepy.
Yeah, we always go down there.
Okay, well, go on down there at 3:30 and see what happens. Now, she never, just like the lady and with just like the nurse, they never, bother anybody. The nurse doesn't interact with anybody at all. And this lady just sort of stands there looking at people, which would totally creep me out. But especially in my room, somebody appeared at the foot of your bed there. But they never really hurt anybody. In fact, none of the spirits. When I get down to the second floor, there's one that can be a little active, but he doesn't ever really hurt anybody or anything. In fact, we'll move on down to the second floor now. So other than that, now the stories we're telling you are ones that have been told for decades and decades. That's why we tell them with very little variation in them. But you can have your own experiences here. Everybody that stays here has a story to tell. We certainly just can't include all of them on the tours here. But these are ones people have told for years and years, and that's why we feel comfortable in telling them. So we're going to go down here. Now, the second floor, in my opinion, we go tour guides kind of argue about it a bit, but it's the most active floor of the hotel, I think. Now, if you went down the hallway there, took a look for like you see here, a little boy is seen in there frequently. Oh, we know who this little boy is. His name is little Brecky Thompson. He lived his whole life here at the Crescent Hotel. He was born in 1914, and in 1914, 10 days after his 4th birthday, he succumbed to appendicitis and infections in his stomach, and he died. He went to college here. They mentioned him in the annual and the yearbooks quite a bit. So we don't know. We do know he had a little blue velvet suit they dressed him up in, and it could have been some hot August day here in Arkansas, and they dressed him up in that thing. Well, I certainly wouldn't have thought that was very fair either. Also, he was the only child living here with about 120, 130 adults. Didn't seem to resist that. Now, we hadn't heard from Brecky in quite some time, but we didn't know if he left us and gone on somewhere else. But one of the ghost tour guides told me a couple of weeks ago she was walking down the staircase down there, and she saw this little ball rolling in the middle of the hallway. So, of course, she immediately ran out to see if anybody else was in the hall. She didn't see anybody. She said, "I think Brecky's letting us know he's active again and everything." And that's little Brecky. Staff, more than anyone, frequently reports the smell of a very sweet-smelling tobacco in this part of the hallway and on the entrance to that room there. And we think that's a lingering, haunting left from Dr. Ellis. Now, Dr. Ellis is seen occasionally, too. And when he's seen, he floats through the door there. He'll float through the door across the hallway to the elevator. And when he's done whatever it is he does, he floats right back. And he goes through the door as though it were made out of fog. And when he's seen, he's in his Victorian finery. He's got his top hat and his waistcoat and his vest on and everything. But he's only seen from the waist up. never seen with his legs, and we don't know why this is. We do know at the exact moment of his death, he had both of his legs, and both of his legs were functional. What happened was he owned a building downtown. Actually, the first house when you leave the Crescent on your right there, was the Ellis house. That's where Dr. Ellis lived. And somebody came and told him there was a fire at one of his buildings he owned downtown. It was called the Rosewater Ellis Building. So he ran down there. Now, interestingly enough, a little story of irony here, Dr. Ellis was also an engineer. And when they were putting in the infrastructure in town, he designed our water and sewer system, the one we're actually still using today. And so that night, though, apparently the infrastructure, the water system wasn't working well. They were unable to extinguish the blaze. His building was not insured. So he goes down there, watching this big investment of his go up in flames. He became so upset, so agitated, he had a heart attack, dropped dead right there in the middle of Spring Street in front of his burning building. And I tell you that part to let you know he had both his legs. Both of his legs were working up until the exact moment he died. Now, why he chooses not to appear with them, that we can't tell you. One of the mysteries here at the Crescent Hotel. Now, about a little over halfway down the hallway there, we have the most popular room in the hotel. It's room 218. It is the most requested room in the hotel, and it is the most active room in the hotel. And this room is also known as Michael's room, pretty much ground zero for the hauntings here at the Crescent Hotel. Now, Michael was a young man. He was about 17 years old, and he was a member of one of those stonemason families that came up here to work on the construction of the Crescent Hotel. And Michael, like a lot of 17-year-old boys, was an incorrigible flirt. He loved to flirt with the ladies, and unfortunately, this led to his death. One day in 1885, the Crescent was about half completed. Michael was up on one of the towers of the roof up there doing some work. Some pretty young lady entered the garden over here. Well, he just had to get her attention. He was immediately smitten with her, and with the bravado of a 17-year-old boy, pretty sure she'd be smitten with him too. So he starts hollering at her, yelling, trying to get her attention, waving his arms. He misstepped and he fell. He fell all the way down, landed on a beam in what became room 218. The walls weren't even up yet back then. And this caused Michael's death. People that stay on the second floor here, especially in the main corridor, often report hearing a big loud thump on the floor. They say it's like a big bag of cement being dropped, but it's so strong it makes the floor reverberate. And we think that's a reoccurrence of Michael's death, but Michael's much, much more than that. Michael's what we call a poltergeist. Michael is a loud, noisy ghost. He likes to move things around. He likes to play tricks on people. And just like when he was alive, in death, Michael loves the ladies and loves to flirt with them. That room is most active when ladies stay in the room there. Doesn't seem to matter their age either. Michael loves them all. The things that happen in that room, frequently things you'd associate with typical hauntings. There's two latches on the doors that go out to the balcony. People have reported locking those, getting in bed. The doors just unlock, and the doors to the balcony just open. The curtains can sway when there's no breeze or wind in there. Rapping is heard on the headboards. Objects disappear from the room on a regular basis. Michael loves to hide stuff. People usually find it, but they have a hard time sometimes. Objects even fly across the room in there. The lights go on and off, the TV goes on and off, the phone rings, nobody's on the other side, the heat can go out. That's just Michael carrying on. But he saves most of his attention for the ladies in there. Ladies are reporting having unseen hand reach out, gently stroke them on the arm, maybe brush them on the cheek, maybe even brush down their hair a little bit. Now, one of the more common occurrences we have in there, let me just show you something here. The ladies putting their makeup on in the mirror. A lot of times they'll report seeing a man watching them over their shoulder. They turn around, there's nothing there. And we think this is the face they probably see. This will be young Michael there. Now, one of the more common occurrences that happens in this room is when ladies are in the shower in there frequently, the shower curtain just comes flying open. Apparently, Michael likes to get a little peek at the merchandise in there. Now, if this happens, we recommend you ladies get out of the shower, because the next thing he's going to do is start messing with the faucets. He likes to turn down the hot water so you get splashed with cold water. Of course, that'll make you squeal, jiggle around a little bit, maybe jump out. That's the reaction we think Michael's looking for in there. Michael also pays attention to gentlemen, but in a completely different way. Gentlemen reported getting into bed there, and they'll suddenly have the bed covers pulled off of them, and they describe what feels like a foot in the middle of their back, trying to push them out of the bed like that. Michael's the star of the show in there. He's not looking for competition in the room. And that's about as violent as any of the spirits I talk about did. Michael just wants the ladies alone in there. Now, as I said, I consider this ground zero for the hauntings here at the Crescent. Michael's the first person of which we are aware that died here at the Crescent, and the first reported spirit here. My grandparents spent their honeymoon here in the summer of 1927, and even then they heard stories about Michael, the construction worker that was killed and still walks the hall. So Michael's been around a long, long time, and I've heard his name pretty much my whole entire life.
Um, I'm trying to think of some of the stories I can tell. Well, one of the things, as I said, Michael likes to hide things. One time this lady was here, she was with her husband, their daughter was getting married at the Crescent Hotel. So, of course, she was mother of the bride, and she had a brand new outfit she was going to wear at the wedding. Well, when she woke up the morning, the day of her daughter's wedding, her dentures weren't in the soaking jar. So, of course, she began a frantic search for them. Couldn't find them, even called housekeeping up here. They could not find these dentures. And here she bought this new outfit, it's her daughter's wedding, and here she was going to have to go stand up in front of everybody without her dentures. So, of course, she felt horrible. The hour drew near. Eventually, she had to start putting on her outfit. Very last thing she put on were her brand new shoes. She just bought them, never even worn them, stuck her foot in one of them, and there in the toe of one of her shoes, she found her dentures, which sounds like something a 17-year-old boy would do, and that's just Michael showing off down there. Now, I did have one lady when I was giving a tour, and I was down in front of her room at the time, and she came out, and she looked at me, and she goes, and I had a group of people much larger than her. She goes, well, boy, I hope Michael likes cougars. She probably had about 5 years on me. She was probably in her mid-60s. She goes, I hope Michael likes cougars because I'm looking to meet him and have some fun tonight. So I said, well, I don't know, ma'am. I don't think there'll be much problem. Now, I saw her the next day when I was giving a tour, and she goes, yeah, he likes cougars. He showed up last night and carried on with me. So apparently, and now on the third tour I gave here, I had a couple going on. They'd been having a little fun before the tour, but they were okay on the tour. And I started telling these stories, and the wife started trying to convince her husband maybe he needed to sleep on the couch in the lobby so she could spend the night alone with Michael. Of course, he said, no, ma'am, I will be by your side the entire evening. Saw them the next day, too. I said, well, how was it with your husband in there? She goes, oh, that didn't matter. Michael showed up and carried on and everything. So as long as there's a lady in there, Michael loves it. He loves to carry on. And while we certainly can't guarantee anything, 99.9% of the time, you stay in Michael's room. And actually, Michael's room is one of the two sort of experiences, none of them grand or much to tell about. That happened in Michael's room when I was in there one evening, though. So Michael likes to carry on. And as I said, he is probably our best known spirit here at the hotel. And I'll show you a little picture of Brecky, too, the little boy with the place to play with the ball. He's actually, this was painted before, but we actually have, Brecky's one of two spirits we actually have pictures of. We have one of Dr. Ellis, and we have several of Brecky in the annuals and yearbooks from that time then. And actually, the picture was very, very close to him when the painting was done, and she saw actual photographs of him. The people gave description over the years were so accurate. So we're going to move down to the first floor now. I've got a couple of things to tell you down there, and then we're going to head down to the basement and go on into the morgue. And you're up on the third floor, right?
The TV, it's turned on
What? They didn't hurt you, they're just
well,
carrying
they
on
made me
showing.
fall off the bed.
Well, but that was your fault, right there. Now, this sculpture done by a local artist, Mel Shipley, this represents Michael, the young man in the 218 I just talked about. And he's almost directly above us. And Mel put him here in engineering clothing with his stonemason's tool here, put him on a crescent moon. But the most interesting part of this sculpture, I think, is the base down here. He's got a woman's figure down here. And it is all explained right here, but why would I bother to read the directions? Of course, I went and found Mel and said, why is that woman at the base of Michael's statue? Is this because he's so popular with the ladies? Is this one of his fans or his groupies or something? And he said, no, indeed, because Michael died at such a young age, he was 17 years old, that he put a representation of Michael's mother down here. And she's trying to guide Michael to his final resting place. Now, I know she stays here a bit longer. Now, this desk right here was actually Mr. Baker that had the cancer clinic. He had this in his back office in there, and it was twice a day. It actually had 6 sides on it. He had a number of businesses, several of them were legitimate, so every section of the desk was for a different business he had. So very organized, like a growing form of computer back then. Now, the other half of the desk disappeared sometime in the 1980s. We don't really know what happened to it. But this is actually our concierge desk now, and that was Mr. Baker's original desk we had. We're going to move on down this way. I do want to point out the portrait of the cat up there. That's Morris. He was our resident hotel cat here for 21 years, 1973 to 1994. And Morris is still seen occasionally. Now, if you go down this back step and turn to your left there, you'll see a little marble tombstone down there in the garden. And that's where Morris was buried. They actually built him a little casket because he was so popular and beloved here. And they actually did a funeral service for him that over 50 people showed up to. But apparently Morris didn't like lying under that marble tombstone. He got up and he's still seen around the hotel occasionally. Generally, the younger you are, the better chance you have of seeing him. We currently have a black and white cat around here. His name is Jasper. But if you see an orange cat, that's Morris. And you've seen a ghost. Usually he's seen over here in front of the fireplace. That was his best place to hang out there and all. Y'all seen Jasper then? The black and white
Yeah,
cat?
he was running across the road when we were going to the car.
Okay, well you can see him in here and he'll lie up on the desk over here. He might even lie down in the middle of the rug right there. You see some kid drop their toy. He's the most laid back cat, and if you like cats, he's quite friendly and you can go up and pet him. He's usually hanging out here this time of night though. We had a Christmas tree right here at Christmas time with a little electric train that ran out of it. Jasper would just walk over and lay down on the track, derail the train. He decided that was the best place for him to sleep, and I would come in every day, and he seemed to go over there just about the time I was coming in doing my tours, and you just watch him go over there, lay down, derail the train, and just take it easy. The train find its own track to run on. That was his place to sleep in. And if any of you have a cat, you know that's just what they do, and we just respect it for them though. Kid, go follow me down this way. Now that little staircase doorway next to us was put in for Morris when he was here, when he ruled this castle up here on top of the mountain. That made it easier for him going outside when the big doors were closed and he had to go do his business outside there. Now, one of the interesting things, since you ladies are staying here at the hotel tomorrow, when you go outside, look up at the chimneys. Mr. Baker, when he was here, he had a real fetish for the color purple.
Cat door.
It's always been the traditional color of power and royalty, and he thought he was a very megalomaniacal man, basically, with a huge ego. And he thought the more he surrounded himself with purple, the more powerful he was. He was always seen, he always wore a white suit, purple shirt, purple tie, purple socks, purple shoes. His car was purple, and when he took over the Crescent Hotel, with the exception of the lobby, he painted this gaudy kaleidoscope of colors. Most of the hallways and rooms were painted purple in various shades of lavender. And you go outside during the daytime and look up at our chimneys. He painted all those elaborate chimney stacks purple too. 80 years later, you can still see a little tinge of lavender to them. For years, I just thought it was an odd color of brick, but they're not. They're completely normal bricks. It's still the legacy left over from when Mr. Baker was here. Just one of those odd little things I like to point out to people.
We're going to the morgue.
Now, most of the time on the tours, we do enter from the outside, a bit more dramatic, but because of the weather, we're going to enter this way. We're at the south end of the building.
We're going to walk completely under the crescent to the north end of the building. I do like to tell people, because this is the same way we exit, along the way you may pick up some smells of lavender or lilac, and I don't believe this is any grand Victorian lady still wandering the halls with their lavender perfume walked on. We're by the spa. In fact, he used to go down there and just make it up, and the ladies that work there had to come in every morning, put all his stuff away that he messed up, and then get to work. Apparently that occupies the rest of the here. He doesn't mess up the room anymore. He just plays with the ball, puts it down so everybody wakes up. He goes back upstairs trying to find someone to play with. All right, y'all follow me down this way, please. Now, when we go into the morgue, the first room we're going to enter is the autopsy room, but I'm going to direct you back to another room with some benches and chairs, so just go back there and have a seat. We will come back to the autopsy room, though. That's where we conclude the tour.
Oh.
Except for this one, that's his mug shot when they inducted him up there. All that was waiting for him. All they got was him when they arrested. They had no assets to seize. Very, very smart man. So Thelma had all the money from the sale of the property, and 28, which is where he died. Question. What do you think he died of? Absolutely. Divine justice caught up with the man. Cancer of the liver took him down. And apparently, at the end, he did use pain relief on himself. Something he did not afford his patients when they were here in pain from the cancer here at the hospital. Now, one of the odd things Mr. Baker did, and we really don't know why he did this, when patients did die here, he would have his staff take them into the autopsy room, and they would perform a dissection on them. They would remove the cancerous tumor and the accompanying tissue or organ that the tumor was on, and they would put it in jars of formaldehyde, and it was displayed on the walls of this room right next to us called the parts room. Now, we don't know why he did that. He claimed to cure cancer, but he was showing clear evidence of the fact these people died of cancer. At this point in time, we think he was probably unraveling. We know the psychiatrist up in Leavenworth Penitentiary had diagnosed him as delusional. So that probably had some program came here to do their show. Their whole thing was to find physical explanations for paranormal activity. I'm happy to say the Crescent stumped them at every turn they could. One of those was under Miss Theodora's room, and another one was down here in the parts room. They actually captured it on film, what they found in there. So I'm going to show you this little 3-minute film clip of what they found in there, and then we're going to head on into that room ourselves. And you all can make your own decision.
This is the room that was filled with jars of formaldehyde, body parts. While me and Grant were checking out the room with the thermal camera, checking the fire drain was down, was this figure that was no more than 2 feet away from me. Honestly, gave me chills. That kind of stuff just doesn't happen very often. It's the holy grail for us investigators. And to know that happened right next. Put it on the thing. It's gone now.
Why was the tube hot?
I don't know. Me and Grant were looking at the doctor, and because the tube was red, there's really no reason why that tube should be red. The tube is black. It's usually to do with routine. You don't have to think anything. No, it's freaking straight painted white. At first, I thought it was Grant's reflection, but it turns out it wasn't. It's something we've never caught or seen before. But we really need to analyze it and try to understand it before we present it as evidence.
Okay, so that's what the professional paranormal investigators found.
This is the room.
All right, guys. So we're going to go in there now. Y'all follow me in. Now, here's Mr. Baker at his 6-sided desk there, plotting something evil into it. There is a step down. Be careful, please. And this is the locker you saw in the video where the apparition appeared. And this is the tube that was spray painted that was glowing red hot for no discernible explanation. And this is where the body parts were lined up on these shelves here. And here's something sort of interesting, which I just never took the time to look at it. But actually right here we have a photograph of the jars with the body parts. So if y'all want to take pictures now with your camera or your phone mounts or something like that, very common down here in the morning happens. However, tried to take 9 pictures of this, his flash would go off. He turned the other angle in the room. He tried to call me back here, actually going into the other room to show me. But it would take a camera thing, but it wouldn't take a picture of that. I don't know why. Sometimes people kind of batteries are full, be it like a machine or something. Very, very common down here. Things are we get out of here. Because you ladies have been and you weren't in the room I gave out my card. I'm going to have my card to you. The back address, you capture anything interesting or have an interesting story, send it into our Gmail address. That's how we post our stories. And if you want pictures, any other pictures that I showed you or different ones, we have banners like this up in the lobby on coffee. Your leisure to do them. We got some good ones. You don't want to follow me into the autopsy room. It's lovely down here. It's much cooler, but just the humidity levels going up here. Now, as I said, when the Crescent was originally built, kitchens down. They didn't have refrigeration back then. This whole thing is encased in cork, what they use for insulation, and they would buy these huge blocks of ice, stick them in there. It's where they kept the meat, gone into the asylum, or even after they died. Mr. Baker would have his staff type up a letter on that piece of paper, and it would say something like, "Oh, I'm feeling so much better. get mailed out to their relatives or whoever was paying for their stay here. And the people had already died. Now, some people just sent in a monthly check for their relatives or their loved ones here. Well, Mr. Baker just wouldn't inform them when the person died. He'd keep collecting those monthly checks. When people did die here, he always turned the bodies over to one particular funeral home in town because they gave him a kickback for everyone he sent to them. So he made money off these people long after they died. Now, when he was holding on to the bodies and still bilking the families out of money, this is where he kept the bodies, in the old walk-in cooler. So now, you guys are going to love this one. For the conclusion of the tour, sort of the climax of the tour, what we let people do is you can go in the walk-in here. I'm going to turn out the light and close the door behind you, and you can experience all the creepiness yourself. Now, I do have a couple of ground rules, and if it was just you ladies, I wouldn't say anything, or if you're college kids on spring break, I wouldn't say anything, but I do ask you to respect the other people on the tour. I'm quite serious at this point when I say this. People get really freaked out in here. We've had some incidents, so as humorous as you might find it, please don't do anything to startle the other people when they're in there, okay? I do ask this. We had one lady freeze up, thank goodness it wasn't on my tour. They had to get security down here to get her out. She was so terrified she couldn't move. Interestingly enough, as soon as she left the steps of the Crescent, she was back to her normal self. Her husband said he'd never seen her. Well, mainly stuff like that. People just get really scared and they don't want to come out. Now, I'm going to be standing right here. You'll be in there less than a minute, maybe a minute. If you want to come out before it's up, bang on the door. I'll be glad to let you out. Now, I do ask for complete silence when I open the door. This is the one sort of cheesy state fair haunted house effect we have on the tour. Actually came with the place, and it's something every haunted building needs. A groaning door. That's my favorite part of the tour. Everybody's expecting something to jump out. And Mr. Baker will be keeping you company if you decide to go in there. Now, if you look at the back wall in there, that is actually authentic to Victorian times. You can see the cork under the wall. Pretty soon we'll probably